A scream pierces the medieval square as a victim straddles a jagged wooden beam, gravity turning it into pure torment. Welcome to the wooden horse, riding pain in medieval and colonial times. Grab a cup of tea, take a seat, and dive into this brutal tale. If you're hooked, hit subscribe. Your support means everything to us. Let's dive right into the roots of this infamous device, folks. The wooden horse, often called the Spanish donkey or the Chevrolet, wasn't born in some mad inventor's workshop overnight. Its story stretches back to whispers in ancient lore before solidifying in the brutal realities of medieval Europe. Picture this. In the dusty pages of Greek mythology, there's the Trojan horse, a deceptive wooden beast that hid warriors inside to conquer Troy. But our wooden horse flips that script. It's no gift, but a curse designed to inflict slow, excruciating pain on its riders. Historians trace its practical origins to around the 12th century in Europe, where it emerged as a tool for enforcing discipline in military camps and extracting confessions from suspected heretics during the Inquisition. Why wood? Simple. It's cheap, abundant, and easy to shape into a razor-sharp ridge that could torment without killing outright, allowing authorities to prolong suffering as a deterrent. Now, let's break down how this thing actually worked, step by step, with some real historical examples to make it hit home. The basic design was deceptively straightforward. A tall, triangular wooden beam, sharpened along the top edge like a pyramid's peak, mounted on 4 legs to resemble a horse's body. Victims, often soldiers caught deserting or women accused of witchcraft, were forced to straddle it, their legs dangling on either side. Weights were then tied to their ankles, pulling them down harder onto the edge, which bit into the groin and inner thighs. Gravity did the dirty work here. The longer you rode, the deeper the wedge cut, causing bruising, tearing flesh, and sometimes permanent damage to muscles and bones. No fancy mechanics needed, just physics and cruelty. Take the case of Gilles de Rais, a 15th century French nobleman and serial killer who reportedly used similar devices on his victims before his own execution in 1440. Accounts from his trial describe how such tortures were common in medieval France to break the will of the accused. Or consider the Knights Templar during their 1307 suppression by King Philip IV. Rumours persist that wooden horses were employed in secret dungeons to force false confessions of heresy, blending pain with psychological terror. But it wasn't all about high-profile cases. This device trickled down to everyday punishments. In medieval armies, like those of the Holy Roman Empire, commanders used it for quick corrections on unruly troops. Practical tip from history. If you're ever researching your family tree and stumble on ancestors in medieval militias, check old chronicles for mentions of riding the mare, a euphemism for this torture that pops up in records from England to Spain. It was gender neutral in theory, but women often suffered it disproportionately during witch hunts. As seen in the 1486 Malleus Maleficarum, the infamous witch hunter's manual that endorsed such methods to purify the soul through bodily anguish. The pain was multifaceted. Physical from the splitting pressure, emotional from public humiliation, victims were sometimes paraded, and even medical, leading to infections or infertility. Fun fact, some versions had adjustable heights or added spikes, customizing the torment like a medieval adjustable desk from hell. Wrapping this up, the wooden horse's medieval origins reveal how societies weaponized simplicity for control, turning everyday materials into symbols of fear. We've seen its mythical echoes, mechanical brutality, and real-world victims, setting the stage for how it evolved overseas. Stick around for Chapter 2, where we'll cross oceans to explore its colonial adaptations. Things get even more intense when empires export pain. Chapter 2. The wooden horse sails. Across the Atlantic, colonial cruelty. Unleashed as European ships carved their way through the Atlantic, they carried more than just settlers and supplies to the New World. They brought the wooden horse, a grim passenger ready to enforce order in the wild frontiers of colonial America. By the late 16th and early 17th centuries, this torturous device had hopped from the cobblestone streets of Europe to the muddy outposts of Virginia, Massachusetts, and beyond, adapting to the rough-and-tumble life of colonies where law was often as brutal as the wilderness. Here, the wooden horse wasn't just a tool for punishment. It became a public spectacle, a way to cement authority in communities teetering on the edge of chaos. Let's unpack how this medieval menace found new life across the ocean, with stories that show its raw impact. In the colonies, the wooden horse was a go-to for maintaining discipline in a world without prisons or formal jails. Picture Jamestown 1610, where settlers were starving and rebellions simmered. Colonial leaders, like Captain John Smith, needed ways to keep order among desperate men, and the wooden horse was perfect, portable, cheap, and terrifying. Court records from Virginia's early days describe men forced to ride the horse for crimes like stealing food or defying orders. One settler, Thomas Garnett, was sentenced in 1619 to ride the wooden mare for 2 hours in the town square after brawling over a debt. His punishment wasn't just about pain, it was a public warning, with townsfolk jeering as he grimaced atop the sharp ridge, weights pulling at his legs. The horse's design stayed true to its European roots, a triangular beam, sharp enough to bruise and cut. But in the colonies, it was often rougher, cobbled together from local timber, sometimes with jagged edges from hasty craftsmanship. The device also played a starring role in the colony's religious fervour, especially during the witch trials of the late 1600s. In Salem, Massachusetts, 1692, the wooden horse was used to extract confessions from those accused of witchcraft. Though records are murkier here due to the era's secrecy, one chilling account from a lesser-known trial in Connecticut describes a woman, Goody Bassett, forced to straddle the horse in 1651 after being accused of cursing a neighbour's crops. The public setting amplified her humiliation. Crowds gathered, believing her suffering was divine justice. Unlike in Europe, where the horse was often hidden in dungeons, colonial versions were set up in open spaces, like market squares or churchyards, making the punishment a community event. This wasn't just about hurting the body, it was about breaking the spirit in front of everyone. Military camps in the colonies also embraced the wooden horse, especially during the lead-up to the American Revolution. British garrisons stationed in Boston or New York used it to discipline soldiers who deserted or looted. A 1756 journal entry from a British officer in Fort Ticonderoga notes a soldier riding the wooden colt for stealing rum, his cries heard across the camp as a lesson to others. The horse's portability made it ideal for frontier forts, where space and resources were tight. Colonists even adapted it for local flair. Some accounts mention horses decorated with carved animal heads to mock the victim, adding insult to injury. In Puritan communities, the device doubled as a moral tool, used to punish sins like drunkenness or adultery, often alongside pillories or whipping posts. By the time the colonies started dreaming of independence, the wooden horse had carved its mark, not just on bodies but on the social fabric. It was a symbol of control in a world where survival demanded obedience. As we close this chapter, we've seen how the wooden horse thrived in the raw, unpolished colonies, from Jamestown's muddy streets to Salem's fevered witch hunts. Next, we'll explore how this device morphed in different cultures, taking on new forms and meanings as it spread. Stay tuned for Chapter 3, where the story gets even stranger. Chapter 3: The Wooden Horse in Global Hands, Cultural Twists on a Torturous Tradition. As the wooden horse galloped through history, it didn't stay confined to Europe or its colonies in America. It found its way into the hands of diverse cultures, each twisting its design and purpose to fit their own brand of justice. By the 17th and 18th centuries, This grim device had spread across continents, from the disciplined armies of Asia to the tribal councils of Africa, and even the fringes of the Ottoman Empire. Each region reshaped the wooden horse, blending local customs and materials into its brutal framework, creating variations that were as unique as they were painful. Let's travel the globe to see how this instrument of torment took on new life in far-flung places, with stories that reveal its chilling adaptability. In East Asia, particularly in Qing dynasty China around the 1700s, a cousin of the wooden horse emerged in military and judicial settings, known as the wooden donkey in some records. It was used to punish rebels or corrupt officials. Unlike the European version's sharp triangular beam, the Chinese variant sometimes featured a flat bench with a central ridge, designed to press rather than cut, prolonging discomfort without permanent damage. Historical accounts from the 1720s describe a disgraced magistrate in Guangdong forced to sit on the donkey for hours during a public trial, his legs bound to keep him upright as villagers watched. The spectacle was meant to shame as much as hurt, aligning with Confucian ideals of public morality. The device's construction often used polished bamboo or lacquered wood, reflecting local craftsmanship, and some versions included restraints to hold the victim's arms, adding to the strain. Across the Indian subcontinent, the Mughal Empire's armies adopted their own take on the wooden horse during the same period. Here, it was less about public display and more about internal discipline within sprawling military camps. Mughal chronicles from the 1680s mention a device called the Sharpei of Pain, a low wooden frame with a spiked ridge used to punish soldiers who broke ranks or stole supplies. One story tells of a cavalryman under Emperor Aurangzeb who endured the Sharpei for deserting during a campaign, his punishment lasting until he swore loyalty anew. The design was practical for mobility, light enough to be carried with armies on the move, often made from local teak or sandalwood. Unlike the Western focus on physical agony, the Mughal version leaned into psychological pressure, with victims often left in sight of their comrades to deter others. In parts of West Africa, particularly among the Yoruba kingdoms in the 18th century, a similar device appeared in tribal justice systems. Known locally as the seat of judgment, it was less a horse and more a narrow wooden bench with a raised pointed edge. Used during disputes over land or theft, it was reserved for those who refused to confess. A 1760s oral history recorded by a British trader describes a thief in Oyo forced to sit on the seat for a day, weights tied to his feet, until he revealed his accomplices. The Yoruba version was often carved with ritual symbols, tying the punishment to spiritual beliefs about cleansing guilt. Unlike the colonial horse's public spectacle, these sessions were often private, conducted by elders to maintain community harmony without widespread humiliation. The Ottoman Empire, straddling Europe and Asia, also had its spin on the wooden horse, particularly in its Balkan territories during the 1700s. Called the Devil's Saddle, it was used in military garrisons to discipline janissaries, elite soldiers who sometimes rebelled against their commanders. Ottoman records from 1710 describe a mutinous soldier in Belgrade strapped to the saddle, its sharp edge lined with leather to control the degree of pain, allowing commanders to prolong or shorten the ordeal. The device was often painted black or red, a visual cue of its dread, and used in fortress courtyards where other troops could see. This version emphasized control over a multi-ethnic army, with the horse's design varying by region. Some used iron reinforcements for added weight. Others kept it simple with oak. The wooden horse's global journey shows how a single idea, pain as punishment, could morph to fit the needs of wildly different societies. From China's bamboo donkey to the Mughals' spiked Sharpei, each culture left its mark on this device, proving its grim versatility. As we wrap this chapter, we've seen the horse ride across continents, adapting to new hands and new horrors. Next up, Chapter 4 will dive into how this device evolved with technology as the age of industry sharpened its edge. Stay tuned for more. Chapter 4: The Wooden Horse in the Age of Industry, mechanized misery. As the world churned into the Industrial Revolution in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the wooden horse didn't fade into history's shadows. Instead, it found new life, retooled with the precision and ingenuity of an era obsessed with machines. No longer just a crude wooden wedge, the device was refined in military barracks, penal colonies, and even early prisons, where the spirit of industrialization added gears, metal, and calculated cruelty to its design. From Europe's expanding empires to America's growing penitentiaries, the wooden horse became a symbol of a new age where punishment was as systematic as the factories that defined it. Let's explore how this ancient torment adapted to a world of iron and steam, with stories that bring its mechanical evolution into focus. In Britain, the heart of the Industrial Revolution, the wooden horse was upgraded for use in naval and military settings. By the 1790s, Royal Navy shipyards introduced a version reinforced with iron brackets, making it sturdier for the rough conditions of ships at sea. Sailors caught stealing rations or fighting on deck faced this iron-backed mare, as some logs called it. An 1804 record from HMS Victory describes a seaman strapped to the device during a stormy voyage, the iron frame ensuring the horse stayed stable as waves rocked the ship. The sharp wooden ridge remained, but now it could be adjusted with screws to increase pressure, a nod to the era's love for precision engineering. This allowed captains to fine-tune the punishment. More pain for repeat offenders, less for first-timers, while keeping the spectacle public to deter the crew. Across the Atlantic, the young United States took the wooden horse into its early prison systems, where industrialization meant efficiency and punishment. In places like Philadelphia's Walnut Street Jail, opened in 1790, the horse was used as a disciplinary tool for inmates who broke rules, like attempting escape. Unlike the colonial era's rough-hewn versions, these were often factory-made, with standardized designs that included metal hinges to adjust the height or angle of the beam. A 1810 prison log recounts an inmate, James Carter, forced to ride for 3 hours after attacking a guard, the adjustable beam set to maximize discomfort without breaking bones. This precision reflected the era's shift toward calculated punishment, where pain was measured out like a commodity, aligning with the rise of penitentiary systems that aim to reform through suffering. In the penal colonies of Australia, the wooden horse took on a particularly grim role during the 1820s. At places like Port Arthur in Tasmania, convict overseers used a version called the punishment triangle, which combined the traditional wooden ridge with chains and pulleys inspired by mining equipment. Convicts sent to hard labor, like those building roads, faced it for infractions such as laziness or insubordination. One account from 1825 details a convict named Mary Walsh, sentenced to the triangle for stealing tools. The pulleys allowed overseers to lift her slightly, then drop her back onto the ridge, intensifying the pain with each cycle. The use of industrial materials, iron chains, steel bolts, made the device more durable and terrifying, a perfect fit for the harsh, isolated colonies where control was paramount. Even in continental Europe, the wooden horse evolved with industrial flair. In Napoleonic France, military engineers experimented with portable versions for battlefield discipline. A 1812 report from a French garrison in Spain describes a collapsible horse, its wooden beam fitted with metal joints for quick assembly during campaigns. Deserters were strapped to it in camp, the device's portability ensuring punishment could follow the army anywhere. The design was sleek, almost factory-like, reflecting the era's obsession with efficiency. This wasn't just about pain anymore. It was about creating a system where punishment could be administered with the same precision as a cannon volley. The Industrial Revolution transformed the wooden horse from a crude tool into a calculated machine of misery, blending old cruelty with new technology. From iron-reinforced naval versions to pulley-driven punishment triangles, it adapted to an age of progress while remaining a brutal relic. As we close this chapter, we've seen how the horse kept pace with a changing world, its edge sharpened by industry. Next, Chapter 5 will uncover its decline and legacy, revealing how this device faded but left echoes in modern times. Stay tuned for the final ride. Chapter 5: The Fall of the Wooden Horse. Decline and lasting shadows. As the 19th century waned, the wooden horse, once a fearsome staple of punishment, began to fade from the spotlight. Pushed aside by changing attitudes, new laws, and the rise of modern prison systems, by the mid-1800s, societies in Europe, America, and beyond were rethinking punishment, leaning toward reform over raw cruelty. Yet, the wooden horse didn't vanish quietly. It lingered in remote corners, left a mark on history, and cast a shadow that echoes in unexpected ways today. This final chapter traces the device's decline, its last gasps in obscure places, and the legacy it left in our understanding of justice, with stories that tie its brutal past to the present. Grab your tea, settle in, and let's close this tale. In Europe, the wooden horse's fall began with the Enlightenment's push for humane treatment. By the 1830s, reformers like Jeremy Bentham in Britain advocated for prisons focused on rehabilitation, not torment. The horse, with its medieval roots, was seen as barbaric, out of step with new penal philosophies. British naval records show its use dwindling by the 1840s, replaced by flogging or solitary confinement. One of the last documented cases comes from an 1842 court-martial in Portsmouth, where a sailor was sentenced to ride the horse for drunkenly assaulting an officer. But the punishment was commuted after public outcry. Across the Channel, France banned such devices in military settings by 1850, with Napoleon III's reforms favouring structured discipline over physical agony. The horse became a relic, stored in dusty armories or mentioned in memoirs as a grim curiosity. In the United States, the wooden horse faded as prisons like New York's Auburn system, established in the 1820s, prioritized labor and silence over public spectacles of pain. By the 1860s, its use was rare, confined to rural jails or military outposts. A notable case from 1855 in a Georgia militia camp describes a deserter forced to ride a makeshift horse, but such instances were outliers, criticized in newspapers as outdated cruelty. The Civil War marked a turning point. Both Union and Confederate armies largely abandoned the device, favoring quicker punishments like whipping or execution in the chaos of war. By the 1870s, prison reform movements, backed by figures like Dorothea Dix, ensured the horse was replaced by cells and work programs, seen as more civilized ways to control inmates. In colonial outposts, the wooden horse clung to life longer, especially in places slow to adopt reform. In Australia's penal colonies, like Norfolk Island, it was used into the 1850s for hardened convicts. An 1853 report details a prisoner enduring the triangle for attempting escape, his punishment a final echo of the device's colonial heyday. But even here, British authorities phased it out by the 1860s, pressured by humanitarian campaigns and cheaper alternatives like chain gangs. In other regions, like parts of British India, the horse lingered in remote garrisons until the 1870s, with one account from a Punjab fort describing a thief riding a spiked bench in 1871, likely one of its last uses under colonial rule. The wooden horse's legacy, though, didn't vanish with its decline. It shaped early debates about cruel and unusual punishment, influencing laws like the US Eighth Amendment. Its memory lingered in literature. Think of Charles Dickens' references to brutal punishments in his novels, or in oral histories of soldiers and prisoners. Today, it's a grim museum piece, with replicas in places like London's Clink Prison Museum, where visitors wince at its sharp edge. Its influence even creeps into modern metaphors. Phrases like riding the wooden mare still pop up in historical fiction, evoking a shiver of its past terror. The device also sparked early discussions on torture's ethics, planting seeds for human rights movements that would bloom later. As we end this journey, the wooden horse stands as a stark reminder of how societies once used pain to control, only to reject it as they evolved. From its medieval origins to its industrial tweaks, it was a tool of fear that couldn't outrun progress. If you've enjoyed this dive into history's dark corners, hit that like button, subscribe and comment below. Tell us what other forgotten stories you want us to uncover. Your support means the world to us. Thanks for riding along.